What's up? And welcome to the first ever Bitcoin Magazine podcast. I'm Dave.
And I'm Graham. Dave, why does Bitcoin matter?
Well, Graham, it is the world's most popular cryptocurrency. It's also decentralized, meaning no person, authority, or organization controls it. For that reason, Bitcoin has the potential to upend traditional financial systems, those same systems that have failed people for centuries.
Anyone with a computer can buy or receive it. It's programmable money free from tyranny, oppression, and hyperinflation.
And if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you probably already know this.
So why are we here?
Well, the Bitcoin market is pretty variable, and there's a lot of information out there. To stay on top of this ever-changing landscape, we'll be guiding you through the major stories shaping the price, philosophy, and community around Bitcoin.
Founded in 2012, Bitcoin Magazine is the original source of news, commentary, and thought leadership driving the revolution that is Bitcoin. The Bitcoin Magazine podcast aims to preserve that tradition.
And we'll feature brief interviews from leading experts in the space, providing you with what you need to know and nothing else.
So, without further ado, here it is, the Bitcoin Magazine podcast. Today, we're talking to Jameson Lopp about how to disappear while still staying connected to the modern world. But first, the news.
Finally, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission has published a clear framework for digital assets. The purpose of this framework is to give crypto companies and investors guidelines about whether a cryptocurrency is a security. The detailed framework comes after years of guidance by enforcement, where the SEC prosecuted ICO operators to set an example. This 13-page framework, attached in our show notes, is not intended to be law, but instead an analytic tool for thinking about ICOs. Skating around the legalese, there's not much new in the framework from what securities experts have been advising for some time. The real distinction comes from a clarification from the SEC that a token's definition as a security can ultimately change.
China is again threatening cryptocurrency with a proposed ban on mining. The country's planning agency recently published a list of hundreds of business activities the agency would like to phase out because they did not meet relevant laws and regulations, either because they were unsafe, wasted resources, or polluted the environment. One of those activities added to the list was cryptocurrency mining. As of now, no target date or plan has been laid out for how to eliminate the country's crypto mining industry. A Cambridge University study from December stated that nearly half of Bitcoin mining pools are located in Asia. Experts speculate that this majority is probably based out of China. In past years, the Chinese government has made public claims on banning Bitcoin. Although this has never actually happened, they did ban ICOs in 2017. Currently, Bitcoin is defined in China as a virtual commodity. All financial institutions are prohibited in transacting or dealing with it. Cryptocurrency exchanges are banned, and Bitcoin mining companies require strict reporting.
A court in Nova Scotia has approved a motion to move the case against QuadrigaCX into bankruptcy proceedings. These developments follow Ernst & Young's fourth monitor report, in which the firm recommended bankruptcy reclassification for the case, and reported that the CEO, Gerald Cotton, mixed QuadrigaCX business finances with his personal finances. Under bankruptcy proceedings, Ernst & Young will act as trustee and have far greater leeway to audit QuadrigaCX's finances and business practices by reviewing documents from the exchange and by working directly with witnesses. So far, 119 QuadrigaCX users have applied to represent approximately 115,000 customers affected by the exchange's shutdown in February. Of these, 7 were selected to work with the monitor and law firms to examine court documents and communicate with other affected users in order to recover the missing $136 million.
In Bitcoin Magazine's cover story, our reporter Colin Harper chronicles the journey of the Lightning Torch. The Lightning Torch was a single Lightning Network payment that was forwarded to Bitcoiners around the world via Twitter, with each user adding a few, or in some cases a lot of sats along the way. Launched by Hodlnaut, a Bitcoin Twitter personality, it reached the likes of Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey, and even an outspoken Bitcoin advocate living in an economically sanctioned Iran. Over its 4-month run, it didn't just gain viral notoriety. The Lightning Torch made a real case for the power of a borderless, permissionless currency. In total, it passed through 278 unique participants from 56 countries and touched every continent outside of Antarctica, all without the help of a central authority. Now, it's speculated that the torch will burn out in the hands of Bitcoin Venezuela so they can use the over 7 BTC it has accumulated as proceeds to purchase food, medicine, and other necessities.
The Bitcoin price eclipsed the $5,000 mark this month, While that's a pretty arbitrary threshold, when the price passes a nice round number like that, people take notice. The mainstream media reported on it, and even though many Bitcoin hodlers claim not to care about the moderate price fluctuations, they certainly like to see the price going up rather than declining. In one of his latest price analysis videos, Bitcoin Magazine's Bitcoin Schmidtcoin called the next macro resistance level at $5,600 and said if the market fails to rally, it will retest the established support level at $4,700. Some speculators have claimed that the price increase is the start of the next bull market. Others, like major Chinese OTC trader Zhao Dong, expect the increase to encourage investors to leave the market, putting a new bull run off for as much as 2 years.
Today, we're joined by Jameson Lopp. He's a Bitcoin engineer and the CTO of Casa. Lopp is a well-known advocate for digital privacy, and his decision to live off the grid following several cases of harassment was recently featured in a New York Times article.
So, Jameson, why did you decide to pursue such a high level of privacy? Like, how did you go about doing it?
So, one of the problems I think with this day and age, the communication age and all the changes that have resulted from it is that it's very, very easy to go from being a low profile, average person who's just going about their life to becoming a very high profile person who might get targeted by various bad actors. And so what I've tried to tell people who would immediately brush off most of this stuff as paranoia is that it can happen to anyone. This is not necessarily just for people who are social media influencers or trying to be a public person. This really is for anyone who has a digital footprint, who has a life on the internet, who might do or say things completely unintentionally that result in a lot of attention being focused on them by the global online community.
Okay, so what was the first thing you did?
Yeah, I started with a lot of the popular resources out there. There are various books that are called like How to Disappear, How to Become Invisible. There are a few prominent privacy experts out there who have a lot of really good advice, at least good advice as of 10 or 20 years ago. There's very good advice for like the analog things of like, how do you protect your home address and your mailing address and like the ownership of your private property. I started off with a lot of that because that really is the harder thing to do from a sort of resources and time and finance perspective. So I started with that base of knowledge and started talking to attorneys who could help me set up the legal mechanisms, the legal frameworks necessary for that. But then simultaneously, I was also thinking about all of the different attack vectors online and, how do I ensure that none of my real information gets put into any database, at least as far as I can control. That basically means that you have to set up, other addresses, other phone numbers, other emails, other contact information that you can still get access if someone's trying to contact you through those means, but none of which should be pointing to where you really are. The ultimate, I guess, extreme part of all of this is, in order to really disappear from the sense that it's very difficult for someone, even if someone like hires a private investigator who has access to fairly protected confidential databases, if you want that level of protection, then you really have to throw away everything in your current life. Everything that is connected to your current physical and digital identity. And so that's what takes the most effort is, how do you transition away from using your actual house as your mailing address, from using cars and other public property that's registered to you and your name and your address, and how do you set up everything that you need to live your normal life in a way that is not connected to you. And that's what takes the most effort. You can get a good level of online privacy from like marketing companies and other stuff if you just spend a weekend configuring your computer and your home network to use things like VPNs and Tor and various ad blockers. But if you want to go, deep dive all the way to the bottom of making sure that your actual residence is not in any databases, that basically results in you having to start all over from scratch and build a completely new entity that is very difficult to tie to your identity.
So in the article, there's a lot about like what you did for your digital privacy. And I'm just curious, for the rest of your life, like externally, was there anything you had to sacrifice? Like, I'm sure there are like parts of your life that we're not really thinking about that you've had to give up.
Yeah, so one thing that I guess I haven't talked about as much, a few people have touched on it, but I really went to the kind of a level beyond that, where I want not only to make it difficult for external attackers all over the world to find me, but I actually want to protect myself even from unintentional data leaks. And by that, I mean the fact that people talk. We are social creatures, and as soon as you reveal any bit of information to someone, you have to assume that they're going to talk about it to someone else. Not necessarily because they're a gossipy type of person, but this is just what people do. You have small talk, you talk to each other about what's going on in your neighborhood and whatnot. And so what I'm getting at is that where I am now, none of my neighbors or people that I interact with, none of the service providers that I talk to, none of them know my real name or identity. I have a pseudonym for that. And, in order to maintain that pseudonym, that does mean that I can't have any, possessions or other things inside my house. Like if someone is coming inside my house, I can't, have my like graduation diploma on the wall with my real name on it, for example. So yeah, that is, even taking it to the next level where, you could make an argument that, I could probably be okay letting a few close friends here know, who I really am and what's kind of at stake and why I need to remain private. And, they would probably respect my privacy, but it's just not a risk that I'm willing to take.
Was there anything that was like actually just surprisingly easy?
That's it's actually the only thing that I think that was easy was actually getting anonymous VPN set up. There are a few VPNs out there that accept cryptocurrency, so you can basically acquire some Monero, for example, which is really hard to track, and then pay for your anonymous VPN with a third-party mailbox that you set up that is not tied to your identity, and pay for it in crypto that can't be traced. And I haven't had any problems with that. I have had problems with other services that I've set up, like basically phone number proxies and stuff. Those tend to be a lot less reliable than VPNs. I even had some problems with the like physical mailbox routing that I had set up. So I set up a variety of different private mailboxes that basically forward my mail all over the place before it finally ends up at a destination where I can pick it up. And it actually took me a few months to get that all working correctly. So I had about a month's worth of mail that ended up in an infinite loop between a few of these post office boxes, where they kept just sending it back and forth to each other until I finally figured out what was going on.
Well, where does Bitcoin fit into your quest for privacy?
Well, I mean, Bitcoin does not have the strongest level of privacy, so I don't make purchases with Bitcoin that need to be highly private. I'm definitely keeping track of advances in the space, like with better mixing software that's coming out. And I'm hoping that someday in the not too far future, I'll be able to have a higher degree of confidence that my actual funds are private. It's just, pretty much all of the crypto that I've acquired over the years has been through exchanges that do AML KYC. So I assume that pretty much all of it is trackable, except, with the exception of maybe the Monero, and even the Zcash that I've gotten over the years. I have not been using like the shielded addresses on that simply because not a lot of the wallet software out there has made it easy to do so. So most of that I don't even really touch it that often in the first place. So I mostly think of it as something that I'm waiting for the privacy to improve on, rather than using it in order to improve my privacy. I would say that there is a fairly strong argument that some of the more conventional payment methods I've set up are arguably more private than Bitcoin. And by that, I mean, setting up anonymous LLCs that have bank accounts and then tying other throwaway virtual debit cards to those anonymous LLCs bank accounts, and really setting up like multiple layers of proxies and abstractions away from my actual identity.
What could your average person easily do to be more private?
The easiest thing to do, like I said, was you can spend a few hours or a weekend doing configuration of your computers and your network to help protect you from online marketers. And that's like the really low hanging fruit. If you want to go to the next level, then you could, for example, try to get rid of the tracking device that you carry around in your pocket. Setting up a new phone that is not connected to your identity isn't too difficult. It's a little more complicated than I thought it would be. Like, I thought you could just go into any gas station and buy a burner phone like they did in The Wire, but it is still possible to do that as well. And that would protect you from a lot of different things, not only the mobile phone companies, but any number of applications that might be running on your phone and like reporting location data that's tied to your identity.
If your house was burning down, what is the one thing you would grab?
My dog. He's an integral part of my security system.
The Bitcoin Magazine podcast is a BTC Media produced podcast on the Let's Talk Bitcoin network. This episode was produced and edited by myself and Dave. Stories covered in this episode come from articles written by Bitcoin Magazine staff, including Peter Chihuaga, Colin Harper, Jimmy Akey, and Aaron Van Weerdum. Theme music provided by Billy Sly from the Crypto Cantina. Special thanks to our guest Jameson Lopp, and of course Satoshi Nakamoto. We are eternally grateful. Visit bitcoinmagazine.com for more in-depth news, analysis, and resources about the most successful peer-to-peer currency. And make sure to follow us on Twitter at Bitcoin Magazine. You can find more engaging crypto podcasts over at letstalkbitcoin.com. And you can follow them on Twitter at the LTB Network for all the latest episodes and news. Be sure to subscribe to the show on the Apple Podcast app, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcast. And if you've got the time, please leave us a review. It really helps us improve the show and reach new listeners. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.